Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures podcast. This episode with Beau Button is incredible. He's the CTO and president of Atlas Reality, and they have a couple games that are location-based. You got to get up and walk around, the play to earn. We talk about Web3. We talk about the future of the internet. We talk about his upcoming on-chain game that's going to be released next year. And just like his experience as an entrepreneur, a technologist, managing people, a great, wide-ranging conversation. So I also want to give a shout out to our portfolio company at Proto Ventures, BirdBuddy. BirdBuddy is an AI-powered bird feeder that, yes, will take photos and videos of birds that visit in your property, and you can collect them. It's this cool game dynamic that I'd highly recommend for you. So check out, just Google BirdBuddy, you'll see it show up. Definitely want to give a shout out to them. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there I'll have more extensive show notes to the different things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen, which is what most people do. You can listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures, and it should show up. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Beau Button. All right, Beau, welcome to the show.
Excellent. Pleasure to be here. And quite frankly, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your technical background, got a really interesting thing going. Tell us a little bit about the story.
I've always been into computers, started off young, around 8 in the hardware, tinkering, buying things from, the classifieds back then before, the likes of Craigslist. But I got really involved in software around 11 and 12. And from then on, I haven't really stopped. eCommerce, content management, pretty much everything you can think of. But today I find myself in the video game industry.
Aha. And so, is there a Web3 component of what you're doing? And if so, what's your entering the rabbit hole story?
Yeah, so the two titles that we have launched, Atlas Empire is our first, Atlas Earth our second. There are some synergies with what Web3 is bringing to the table with Atlas Earth, but they're not on chain. We are working on a title that will be a blockchain first-class citizen, something we'll probably launch in Q3 2023. But right now, we are in the play-to-earn space, but we are doing that entirely off-chain.
Got it. And were you like, a lot of others, were you into Bitcoin early on, as a technologist? Or like, when did you sort of get involved with crypto or any of those narratives?
Bitcoin was never really attractive to me. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a point in several points in my life where I was like, I should have bought. But I'm not really one of the speculative type investors, at least not something. I won't invest in something if it's unless it's a company I'm familiar with that I use on a daily basis. And Bitcoin was just like alien. I did read most of the white paper, and I was like, man, this is quite frankly above my pay grade. I'm not an academic scientist. But what really got me into crypto was the Ethereum virtual machine, EVM, smart contracts, and the world of possibilities that kind of opened up, the programming, the programmability of the EVM and Ethereum. So yeah, that's what got me interested, not from a gaming perspective at all. It was more, the way that EVM is marketed is like a distributed computer. I'm thinking, well, all right, well, we have compute problems. We're paying Microsoft, Azure, and Google tons of dollars per year. It's just like, is there something that we could leverage? It wasn't, sadly, but that's what kind of got me hooked.
Got it. Okay, so play to earn. What's the origin story? Right? How did you get into that? Where did that model come into play?
So, I mean, other folks are doing it, most on chain. The reward of what you actually get paid is going to be a token of some sort. There was an attraction to, allowing our end users to have some equity in what we're doing, like real equity, not in the company itself. They're not getting, stock certificates every time they, win a level or something like that. But my partner and I were already in the gaming space, building location-based games, and we saw what, these other play-to-earn games were doing and the communities that were being built up around them, the attraction, the attention, quite frankly, the satisfaction from the players having at least a sense of something that's equitable. So we wanted to leverage that and take kind of from lessons learned from previous ventures. My partner, Sami Khan, he was previously in a fintech, and it was micro investments. So there was some synergies in what they were doing and like what I appreciate about, rounding up every dollar to make sure that you have some, future nest egg. So the goal here was to just basically allow players to earn a passive income via a game. It's not an investment. You play a game, you win, you earn in the game. And the only difference between us and like our not necessarily competitors, but people in this space is we're fiat. You cash out to PayPal, you get money, you go buy a burger.
Got it. Got it. Very cool. Very cool. So then tell us about these two games. How do they work? Who are the typical audience? Like who would be into them?
Yeah, I mean, to be blunt, we lean very heavy young men.
Mm,
We
mm,
had some ideas. So our first game was an amalgamation of the mechanics from Pokemon Go, where you walk around, you see a map. Kind of what most people would say is like the first successful location-based game. Even though Niantic had a game prior to Pokemon called Ingress that was also successful, but it didn't have the IP of Pokemon, so not as many people knew about it. But it was an amalgamation of Pokemon Go and Clash of Clans. So you build your base, you defend your base. There's a global matchmaking system where you can matchmake with the person in Australia if I'm in Austin, Texas, and you can attack each other. And then similar mechanics in regards to location based Atlas Earth is kind of like the modern day Monopoly with the play to earn kind of spin on it. You
mm,
earn
mm.
basic virtual rent. You can cash out that virtual rent. There's some friendly competition for owning the most land if you're a mayor, governor, or president. But yeah, those are the two games. Like our core competency for the most part is location based. You have to walk around. We do have some players that they install the game and they're like, man, I have to walk to play this. You do. You have to get out and about. My partner did coin the term, or at least I believe he coined the term. Toilet time. So you can play the games while you're out and about making your groceries on public transit, but there's a lot to do when you are home. So we've
Mm.
kind of like balanced those two kind of I'm out and about or I'm sitting at home and just want to play the passive game. But yeah, those are the two games that we're working on. But right now I can't talk much about the third one, but it's going to be location based. That's our DNA is location based.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So a lot of the audience, venture builders, venture investors, people love entrepreneurial stories. So as an executive and a CTO in an organization, like what has that process been like to get something off the ground? Or what's the story, right? How did you get to the place where the company is now and your position in it?
Yeah, so I've always been entrepreneurial, quite frankly, because of my bluntness.
Mm,
I've had several full-time like jobs. I did a stint here in Austin, Texas, around Rock at Dell. I worked for some relatively large players in Louisiana. New Orleans is where I was born and raised. But
mm,
I I'm kind of like when it comes to the typical BS that's like in corporate America, I'm incompatible with it. So, and I'm not afraid to voice my concerns. So I always felt like the only way that I'm really gonna be able to breathe and do what I want to do is if I start something on my own.
there you
So for the longest, I was a consultant. I literally was just a hired gun,
go.
and people said, "Hey, I want you to build this. Help me with this." And then I slowly but surely matured that into an independent software vendor model where we were building products for people.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's always been software based, different verticals. I've done everything from education, oil and gas, healthcare. But for Atlas Reality, we were formerly known as Cerberus Interactive. So if you Google us, the lineage is we started around 2016, late Cerberus Interactive. And then in the last 18 months, we rebranded for a multitude of reasons. One, nobody could spell it or pronounce Cerberus, and they didn't know what it was.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's my appetite to kind of do what I want to do and have that freedom. And similar with my partner, Sami, he's on the marketing and user acquisition side. We like to think outside of the box, and sometimes in corporate America, you're just not afforded that luxury. So that's really what has really compelled me to keep doing this. Obviously, video games are fun. I'm an avid video game collector. I don't play them, ironically.
mm.
I don't have the attention span, but yeah, just basically, the goal was let's do whatever the hell we want to do, and let's see what works. And if it doesn't work, let's fail fast and try again.
Nice, nice. Well, the technology nerd in me is always curious. What technology stacks are you using to build these games, and what platforms are they supported on?
this is not going to be popular. So I owe my entire career to Microsoft.
Mm,
When I was 16, I started working full time as a Visual Basic developer with active server pages, aka ASP,
mm-hmm,
building e-commerce sites.
mm-hmm,
Nowadays, Microsoft, I mean, they're more popular now than they were, I think, maybe 6, 7 years ago. There was a period of time where you had like the Linux folks, open source community versus the enterprise, and you had Oracle with Java. But we're exclusively a .NET shop.
mm,
So Microsoft .NET Core, C Sharp, both on the front end and the back end. There are some software applications that we use that are third party that are not written in C Sharp, Node.js, etc. But generally speaking, the stack that we kind of adhere to is .NET.
mm, mm. And then, are you playing more of a management role, or are you hands on keyboard? Like, what is it? What does the day to day look like for you in the organization?
Here lately, it's less keyboard. For Atlas Empires, I was one of the developers. I mean, we were a small shop. We had maybe 8 people. We had a full-time back-end engineer, and
Mm,
I kind of fell into that cloud infrastructure role for a multitude of reasons. A, trust. I needed to set up the infrastructure. We needed to be able to deploy software. So I spent a lot of time building out the pipelines for building the software, releasing the pipeline, or releasing the software. Nowadays, I'm definitely more in a management role. The way I describe my job is unblocking people.
mm,
I've 30 years of experience. We've got some seasoned developers, some new, just relatively unseasoned developers, and rabbit holes are aplenty.
mm-hmm.
So checking in with everybody, making sure that we're, basically unblocked. It could be a multitude. It could be human to human blocks, not necessarily just technical blocks.
Right.
I also do all of the hiring. So this is a knack that I kind of established at my previous venture in New Orleans called Archon Information Systems.
Mm,
We were about maybe 60 people strong, and I hired every one of them. At that company, I was the director of operations, or chief operations officer. So
mhm.
yeah, finding talent, doing the technical side of the interviews, and then passing that on. But there's also a lot of, I wouldn't call it like traditional business development, like trying to find clients, but trying to find platforms, partners. Specifically in the Web3 space, I've probably interviewed or communicated with no less than 100 different Web3 API, NFT platforms, etc. But yeah, that's where I find myself spending most of my time, is just kind of in that management role.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so speaking of Web3, I know you can't get into too much of the details of what's coming Q3 next year, but what are the principles that you're both excited about and or thinking about as you're taking the next leap into interfacing with Web3, right? Because I mean, I sort of admire you for not necessarily jumping on the bandwagon with everyone else and then releasing something that's not actually that much of a value add, right? People still need to pay rent and do their things and
Absolutely.
buy whatever they want to buy. But what are the principles as you take that, I think, appropriate discernment path into Web3? Like how are you approaching it?
I'm only focused on one person, and that's the player.
Mm,
Obviously, we're a business. We've got two successful, commercially successful Web2 classic mobile games.
mm,
But I see through kind of the BS as it relates to ownership and equity. If you're on social media, you're the product. I mean, you're not paying for it. You're the product. I also use social media. I'm not afraid of that. At the end of the day, I use it as a tool to communicate and entertain myself, quite frankly. But
mhm,
what I think Web3 really is, as most people kind of think of it as like the evolution of the internet. You had access to knowledge, access to social features, and now it's like, well, what am I accessing? A lot of folks in this metaverse or Web3 space, it's like, well, three-dimensional spaces, AR, VR, XR, etc. That's just going to come naturally. I think equity. I want players to be able to own things,
mm,
and the blockchain is the ideal rails to basically verify ownership of digital assets. Now, what you do with those digital assets, how much they're worth, either in intrinsic value or speculative value, that's up to the markets. That's not where if you earn something, I want you to have some way to publicly verify that you own it. So in the traditional NFT sense in a game, if I work hard and I grind, I reach a certain level and I unlock a special character, that's in my wallet. Normally those are walled gardens or silos, and you can't do anything with it. You can't monetize it. So I'm very interested in trying to figure out how we kind of establish that ownership layer. But I'm not all in on building a game entirely on the EVM just because it just doesn't make financial sense. But if what the Web3 movement brings to gaming is just the ownership aspect, I'd be happy. But we are working on, and I can talk this much about it, we want portability. I want you to be able to do something in one game and leverage that success in another game, but it has to make sense to the other game's publisher. And right now, if I grind in game A and spend a lot of money, regardless of it being fiat or crypto, what's the incentive for another developer to let you bring over if it's a weapon or if it's a building? I understand avatars. Avatars make sense. There is an opportunity there to monetize, but that's kind of what we're trying to distill right now is really the ownership and then the interoperability. How do I use something I own? Because like I can take a hammer and go anywhere in the world or any kind of tool or whatever and use it. Like I think we have a creative way to solve that problem, and that's what we're working on right now. We've actually got a provisional patent file that I think is going to really, quite frankly, level the playing field in regards to how NFTs are leveraged in games.
Yeah, I recently listened to Matthew Ball's audiobook on the metaverse called The Metaverse, and it's going to change everything. And turns out the book was way more about actually a great primer on just the state of modern technology and sort of how all of that's going to play. But I think there's a whole chapter on interoperability, and I hadn't really thought about it from a gaming perspective about looping in other games stuff into your game, right?
It's a nightmare from a
Yeah.
balance perspective. It's a tough nut to crack. And what we've done is kind of decompose it into its most basic attributes. So those attributes are portable. I don't need your gun, but if I grind and I get XP, or if I get some type of embellishment that allows my bullet to travel further or faster or do more damage, then I can see another game economist going, okay, I can leverage that. The missing link though is, why would that game want to allow the player? I need to make money. I'm building a game. So if you pay for the game and you come in there and use all of this other stuff that you paid somebody else to earn, like, well, how do I make money off of that? And that's really what we're focused is on. The Web3 is going to facilitate the verifiable ownership. The Web2 layer that we're going to basically bake on top of it, which we're building out an SDK for, is going to allow folks to actually share the revenue from that in a way that makes sense for all of the players, all of the publishers. So it sounds like a great idea. It's not something we have in practice yet. Like many ideas, it could very well fizzle, but this is the most, I think, straightforward application of NFTs that Sami and I, my partner, have really come across. And that's why we're focusing a little energy, not a lot right now. It's not our most important objective internally. Atlas Earth, which is the second game I mentioned, is where 98% of our energy is, but we'd be foolish to say and write off Web3 in its entirety.
Cool. Yeah. Because there's going to have to be, similar to early internet, right? There's going to have to be a group of people coming together and decide on those standards, right? Decide on what are those interoperable protocols that we're all going to play with. And then, yeah, it will probably start at a Web2 layer in terms of shared revenue and a sequence of partnerships. But at some point, maybe somebody's going to release that decentralized protocol on top of it that a bunch of game makers then are going to realize.
Absolutely. No, this is just a stepping stone to get to that point, which I think a lot of Web3 companies are missing. Leverage Web3 where it makes sense. Web3 has a really difficult, like the onboarding process for your average user is very difficult, but we found a lot of success in our Web2 games. User acquisition is not easy. We're sitting at just north of 1 million users. Our numbers are off the charts, and don't want to complicate that. So our goal here is to leverage what we've learned for Web2 onboarding, but also bring these Web3 aspects to a game that people want to play, but also looking in the future, if we introduce more titles, how can we share those resources between all of those titles to benefit the player? Obviously, we're going to make money, but it's not going to be 100% of the revenue. And we're certainly not going to be at 30% like Apple and Google. We have to, keep the lights on, but we want players to have, a significant portion of that equity.
Yeah, so within all the different Web3 narratives, right, DAOs and DeFi and NFTs, different types of tokens and metaverses, et cetera, if we come back to that principle of, really focusing on the gamer, the person who's just trying to have fun, or, I'm curious how much ownership and interoperability and maybe even that, I guess I have a couple of questions here. And we'll start with the gamer, right? Because I know that NFTs and others, there's a lot of the gamers that are like, get that stuff out of my game. Like, I don't care. I just want to sit down, chill out, and be in my own little thing. And I don't care about ownership because I'm just here to get entertained. But are we seeing sparks and maybe the play to earn and those incentives? Like, does that change the value prop? Are gamers mixed on this? Like, how are the gamers in your company? Like, thinking about that? I'm curious about that conversation.
Yeah, I've personally interviewed probably 30 of our NFT crypto enthusiast players. I put
Mm,
out a
mm,
questionnaire and I got probably 100 responses and went through and kind of sorted them based on their explanation of what the blockchain was and what their interest was in the blockchain as it relates to our game Atlas Earth.
mm, mm.
They definitely, both sides are represented. I don't know if it's equally. You've got your maximalists and you have your, kind of pessimist, minimalist. Like I don't want it, but our goal here is when we do bring a product on chain, the end user won't know this. They don't need to know it.
Yeah.
It's just like saying, hey, you're playing Pokemon Go, and behind the scenes there's a relational database that's called Postgres. Do you give a shit? Excuse me.
Right.
You really don't. But it brings benefits. It has geospatial features. It scales globally remarkably well. But that's not in the product messaging from Niantic. So I'm always confused when I see like NFT. Like you're not going to know that you're dealing with a non-fungible. It's a smart contract, yeah, but like you don't need to know that. But what we're going to promise or deliver is that I've got it in a wallet, and if you want to remove it from your wallet that's in game and bring it to a marketplace like OpenSea, you can do that, which you can't do now with these walled garden approaches, which is what most games, actually all games, are kind of built, architecturally wise.
Yeah, because Polygon's getting a ton of attention because we just recently, right? Starbucks did their announcement. Reddit's got their whole thing just this few days ago, right? Instagram, Facebook, and others getting on. And it's similarly, right? The end users aren't going to know, like this. They're just digital collectibles. They don't have to understand everything that's going on under the. But there's
No,
going to be a subset, right, that are like really, really into that.
they are really, really into it, and a lot of them aren't fans of L2s. They want everything on Ethereum mainnet. I'm
Mm.
not focusing on those folks. I really just we have to focus on the majority of the users. But if I were tasked out to build a loyalty program, regardless of being a game, if I owned a coffee franchise, I would probably leverage a blockchain. It makes sense. It's really simple. You don't have to build out wallets, and it opens up a world of possibilities for interoperability on the loyalty side, like conversion of points. Like that's a real issue. If you have miles from one airline you want to convert, there's entire businesses that just they broker that, and it's a mess, an absolute mess. So I see that, and that's absolutely like from a blockchain perspective and a technologist perspective, I see that as more exciting, quite frankly, than some of the gaming things that I see. It does solve a legitimate use or a legitimate problem. But yeah, I think Polygon is their marketing department is absolutely incredible. They're everywhere. They're closing these big deals.
Right.
There's another one that I'm very fond of called Avalanche, a relatively unique
Yes.
approach. And they've got subnet approach. And so again, we haven't picked one, but yeah, there's a lot going on in that space, and it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of exciting in that space, like if you're thinking 5, 10 years in the future, what do you see coming? I mean, for better or worse, like what are the things you're excited about? What are the things you're not so excited about? Like what if you were put on your futurist hat,
Yeah.
where do you think we're heading here?
I'll start with the negative. What I'm afraid of is fragmentation. There are
Mm.
going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of public blockchains and decisions that need to be made. Like from my side, like doing the R&D, I'm like, well, which one do we choose? If I choose this one and the next one a week later comes out with a new, it's like, holy shit, like how do I know which, like at some point you just have to hunker down and commit to one of them. But the fragmentation, I haven't seen a whole lot of energy being put behind standards, like you were saying, like even like in our world with this gaming concept that we have, like I would love to drive that initiative to have an open standard with no expectations of monetization from our perspective. We just want to set the standard. We can all participate. We can all make money. So fragmentation is a concern of mine. I think the performance things that most people are concerned about, we're working through those as we just moved on Ethereum mainnet to, proof of stake. And there's a lot more that needs to be done to get to like the scale of like MasterCard and Visa card, who are, I don't know what their back end technology is, but it's not blockchain based, but they do amazing, requests per second or transaction per second. And
Hmm.
then on the positive side, I really do feel like there is a point in the future where your average American won't need to grind in person at a day job. I've been working in front of a computer my entire life. So like this notion of like, I have to go and, get a job at Walmart, Starbucks, or in corporate America, the creator economy. As we build tools around, if it's modeling, animation, building these really lightweight interactive experiences, or maybe, and I'm not a huge fan of influencers, but I do think there's a very real opportunity for people that have a skill set to basically market. If you're a craftsman, like a woodworker, etc. So like building some type of platform where your average American can participate and earn passive income, and maybe at some point in the future, like a full-time job, just doing things on the internet, but productively. I don't necessarily think you're going to make a tremendous amount of money just playing games, but there are going to be plenty of other opportunities in different industries to leverage blockchain and ultimately make money. That's the goal here, is for the players to make money and have fun. I don't want to lose track of that. And that's where I think most Web3 games are now. It's like getting into these games is a chore. Like, that's not fun. And even once I'm in the game and I have my wallet connected and everything's kind of working, I'm like, this is really not a game. It's an academic showpiece. But yeah, that's kind of my two things. Is I want players to be able to earn. I'm a parent of 3, and I see what my kids do in these games, and I'm like, oh my God, what did you do to get a skeleton costume? Like, how many hours of your time? So yeah, I'm excited about that, and that's really what's the driving force behind Atlas Reality and our kind of initiatives. Is we're trying to build out as many features and just kind of functionalities that the players can take advantage of. I didn't mention this, but we do have a nationwide network we refer to as Atlas Merchant Platform, where individual players can actually use their Visa and MasterCards, and in real time they get rewarded with in-game currency. We sit on top of the Visa and MasterCard loyalty rails, but those are the kind of things, like, you're already going to the grocery store. If you're going to buy in-app purchases for $10 and I can give them to you for free because you're buying groceries from a specific grocery store that we have a relationship with, let's do it. That's really dear to me. But like I said, it comes from me being a parent and watching my son spend $40 on, what in the hell is going on here?
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, anything else that the gamers or anyone's seeking a little alpha about your roadmap? Anything else to share with the audience about where you're heading?
No, I mean, look, we're a location-based gaming company. We will have an on-chain solution in 2023. If you're curious about play to earn in virtual real estate, and you're not against being off-chain, Atlas Reality and then Atlas Earth is like the game that I'm talking about. Atlas Empires is still around. It's a really fun game. It's location based, but yeah, you can check us out at just simply atlasreality.com. I'm really active on LinkedIn. I'm starting to do kind of a Metaverse Mondays short form video series, just talking about what I'm running into in the industry. I'm not a pessimist here. Some of the comments I make on LinkedIn may lead you to believe that I'm not a believer in blockchain, but yeah, I'm not a maximalist. I do believe it's here, and I do believe it's an impressive technology, and I do think it's going to be a part of everybody's lives, but they probably won't know it.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. I'm excited for when this kind of blends into the background, and we're doing things and we're leveraging the blockchain, and it's not so much in front of your face, and I don't have to explain to my mom what an NFT is because somebody on Oprah or something said it.
Yeah. That measured approach, I think, is the right thing. Okay. So atlasreality.com, that's the right URL?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll post your LinkedIn so people could check out the Metaverse Mondays. I like that. That's super cool. Yeah, Beau, this has been great. Really appreciate the conversation.
I appreciate you having me on here. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. But yeah, atlasreality.com.
Love it. Cheers.
Likewise.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.